wherever you find yourself today, just know that your best days are ahead. You might have kicked butt in your 30s and you lost your job in your 50s. That sucks. That part sucks. But the best days of your life are still in front of you because of the opportunities that you get to say yes to some really, really wonderful things.
Welcome to the Up Your Average podcast, where Keith and Doug give no-nonsense advice to level up your life. So buckle up and listen closely to Up Your Average.
I'm thinking it's a Travis Tritt day, Doug.
Okay. Travis Tritt.
It's a great day to be alive. You know that song?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I could sing some of that to you.
Yeah.
It is a good day to be alive.
Yeah, we've been talking about time. We had Ray in here talking more philosophically about it. Last time I was given a view of how I've used time in my financial planning. And we've had the opportunity to vicariously live life through many people. So even though we haven't lived through that time ourselves, we've kind of walked through the time with other people. And I thought it might make sense today to just talk about those decades of how people might perceive time and use it at a particular time in their life.
Another great thing about walking through life with other people is not everyone is the same. And so you could be in your 20s or you could be in your 80s and, one of you might be a little more adventurous. One of you might be a little more conservative. And so being able to walk through the decades with couples has been eye-opening for me.
And just the physical DNA of your body makes those decades even different for different people, right?
Yeah, that's why I'm wearing these glasses from Dr. Ciano. They're not even bifocals, Keith. These are just for the computer.
I have a whole series of glasses over here on my desk. I get it. Well, let's throw out there. I didn't tell you the 90s. We don't have a ton of people in their 90s, but like the time that you have in your 90s, and let's just assume that you have cognitive awareness, because part of this aging process is that can slip on a pretty big size of our demographics, particularly more aggressively once you hit your 80s. But how does life look like in regards to time for somebody who's in their 90s?
Man, that's a good one. Caroline's grandma lived to be like 99, and she lived in her own house and cooked her own meals and did all that. She had the luxury of great health. She had the luxury of faith and of people who just loved her. And so I think time in your 90s looks like talking with your loved ones. It's a big legacy play, hanging out with the people you love. I gather you don't worry about money in your 90s. What do you think?
Yeah, Dr. George told me you don't need money past your 80s for that same reason. Is like you just, most of your challenges are probably behind you by the time you're 80 or so. I have both of my grandmothers lived into their 90s, and they had kind of opposites. One wasn't healthy into her 90s and lost some of her cognitive skills, and the other one was healthy pretty much till she died. And my dad had to go over and cut her wooden ladder in half so she quit walking up on the roof with it in her 90s.
Well, that was going to be my thought is if you're in your 90s, 80s, 90s, you're going to need to have a really good repairman, and it's somebody that you really trust, because you probably lived in your house for 50 or 60 years, and it's going to need updating and maintenance. And so you're just going to have to trust who's ever coming in your house.
And I think really, if you have your cognitive skills in your 90s, I think every day is a big day at that point. It's not like that you have a timeline in front of you. It's today. What can I add to the world today? Maybe it's telling my grandkids a little bit of history that they don't know. Maybe it's giving somebody a call because you probably have time available. You may feel lonely at that time because people may not be calling you, but hopefully you can pick up the phone and call somebody else in your 90s, because I think that's a common frustration in that decade, is that people, I don't think they forget about you. I think the people that think you're important are all actually getting busier in whatever decade. So if we jump back a decade to the 80s, what do you think about the 80s?
Well, my mother-in-law turned 80 this year, and she pushed me over the edge. She knew that I love to have fun and adventures. I've owned several motorcycles throughout my life, and one day recently, she says, "Before I die, I want to ride on a jet ski." And so 2 hours later, I went out with my nearly 80-year-old father-in-law and bought a jet ski. And so I think you have to have an adventuresome spirit in you where you're still willing to go on some quests and bring others along with you. We have several clients in their 80s who I think are just so much fun in the way they see the world. They're willing to voice their opinions about the world. And for the most part, probably don't care. I shouldn't say don't care, but like money is not a stressor. Like making money, they've been in retirement for 10 years, maybe 15 years. And so they've seen that it can work, and they're just content with their money situation.
I love that. I love it. And we've had a number of you in here that have sat on the top chair right behind Doug, and we've had some 80-year-olds spin around on that thing, and it's a lot of fun to watch that happen. My observation a lot of times is 80s, a lot of times it's going to be a mixed bag health wise for people that at that time. And so there's different possibilities that can happen in your 80s. I think you could be a financier for the family in your 80s, that you probably are fearing that you're going to run out of money.
Yeah. That's I would say the number one fear.
Yeah.
Am I going to run out?
And what tends to happen with that, my grandmother was one that kind of made me think about it over the last 40 years almost. She had a $10,000 account with me as a young stockbroker, and she wasn't touching it. And she was in her late 80s. And I said, why don't you just split that between her two children? And she bristled up and she said, I've never depended on anybody, and I'm not going to do it today. And I don't think she understood how fast that $10,000 would go if something happened to her health, right? And so there's the fear that I might run out, but at the same time, when you're in your 80s and 90s, you're going to have to depend on people. That's going to just be part of that time of life.
Yeah.
I think I would also just cherish that time with whatever family members you can and find out what's going on in their world and maybe see if they want to learn a little bit about your history as well. 70s are, that's an interesting decade.
What do you think about your 70s?
Well, the idea of 70s is it's a lot closer to me than the 50s are now.
Right.
It's much younger than it was when I was a kid. One of my grandfathers died at 70 and the other was like 75. And so I perceived that was the finish line from them. My dad died at 70. And so 70 is a significant time, I think, to do whatever you're going to do, like physically going to do what you're going to do. I think in your 70s, I think you need to take time to begin leveraging your money to maintain your independence as well. I think you need to, if you do it while you're in your 70s, I think you're going to maintain your independence more. So like in my 70s, I need to learn maybe how to do Uber or to ride in a car like a Tesla self-driving thing. The more that I leverage my money to span out my independence in my 70s, I think the more enjoyable my 70s will be.
I think for a lot of folks in their 70s, they tend to hire people like us or CPAs or attorneys to help them think through some big issues in life, mainly because they just don't want to do it anymore. And so they might have handled their money just fine. They might have grown wealth. They may never have had a will. I mean, these are the times where you start thinking about, what does it look like to bring others into my life and give up some of the control?
Yeah, I think 70s for sure. You want to, like that at that time, you want to make sure that you have those estate documents in place, because things can change dramatically once you move into that decade. I think, prior to that, it's not as statistically as likely things are going to shift pretty dramatically, but definitely there's probably going to be some shifts that happen in your 70s.
When you started in the business, Were RMDs at 70 and a half?
Required minimum distributions weren't even a thing when I got into business.
Okay.
Yes. So the IRAs were brand new. I had bangs a little bit back then, but the idea of an individual retirement account, I think you can make a $2,000 contribution a year. And I don't even know if you could roll 401k. I don't even know if people had much of a 401k back then. So they weren't worrying about taxing you yet. I think we're coming out of we're in the 80s. So the 70s were really difficult. I think they were trying to get people to invest when they started the individual retirement accounts. And so I'm not sure which tax act added in the required minimum distributions, but that would have been a funny thing to wonder about, like why they made the rules so complicated.
It's a conversation that I have often with people who just turned 70. Hey, when do I have to start taking money out? Why is that? That's something that we talk about often.
I think probably in the 70s too. I think it's probably at that time, it's pretty normal to kind of doubt a little bit, have a little bit of doubt. Like I see it even in my 60s that my recall isn't as fast as it was. And I think some of that's just the natural degradation of our brains, or our bodies just aren't physically as strong, and they don't recover as fast as they did in earlier decades.
I gather it's also a really great decade to tell somebody that you love them and forgive them, because a lot of life is probably stacked up. And so you have some opportunities to really make an impact just with those seemingly simple words.
I
think matter.
Yeah, I think the one I wrote down for some of those older decades, and it's really for all decades, is cherish the time. I was in my 30s, I think, when my dad was in his 60s, and I didn't cherish the time with my dad that well when I was in my 30s. And I had some specific time that I didn't value as much as I should have or could have. And it was because I was valuing the time away from him to be with the little ones, because I have little ones. And so that tightrope of those decades of figuring out how to value that time and who to cherish and how to offer that as many people as possible is kind of a big deal. Then we get to the 60s. That gets real personal.
Okay, you're living it. What's up?
Well, the 60s, I think literally, if I think back to being a 7-8-year-old, I just thought 60 was the end of the road. I don't know what you thought when you were little, like what you thought old was.
Right.
But I thought 60 was old.
I probably thought 30 was old.
Yeah. I would look at my grandmother and she had veins popping out of her hands, and I'm like, whoa, what is that? And I think that was pretty normal. I think when I was just a youngster, most people thought 60s were old. I think people say the 60s are the new 40s now.
They do.
I've heard that. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that. But the 60s, I'm doing things in my 60s I never dreamt of.
Yeah.
And maybe part of the tightrope of that is, I think in my generation, I was the end of the baby boomers and right before your Gen X. So I'm just right on that kind of cusp there. And I think the food started getting really bad when, like in my time, like I can remember that we didn't eat as much junk as I eat now. And so it's that tightrope. If the 60s are the new 40s, it may be true for some people.
Yeah.
But other people, they haven't aged well because of the stuff maybe that's in the food. And I just observed that from my social media, my classmates from high school, and just kind of gauging where they're at and things.
It's probably just the circle that I run around. But what I see from my 60-year-old friends is they really cherish people older than them. And so they enjoy the folks who are in their 70s and 80s, and they love to just hang out with them and learn from them and hear about life experiences and just kind of think forward of what their life is going to look like and their impact's going to be. I've seen that with you. I've seen that with my friend Simon. I see that with some guys I know that I have a real relationship with. They really cherish the people who are older.
I think part of that for me is I came up with this perception that our network is kind of like how you draw a Christmas tree when you're 7 or 8. and 0 would be down here at the bottom and 80 would be up here at the top. And just realizing that one's social network tends to get smaller as you get in those higher decades, and realizing that, I think it was our friend Barbara said that they have stories on the shelf. A lot of those people have some pretty impressive stories, and it just blows me away who you can get access to at those generations, what they'll tell you, how much they appreciate it. And so those friendships are really cool.
Yes.
Yeah. The 60s, I would say, one of my friends is in his 70s, and he has he makes it a point to have somebody at least in the decade ahead of him and the decade behind him. And so he's maybe 10 years older than me. And he said one of the things he learned about the 60s is during that time, your recovery time for injuries is longer. And that's probably a big deal. I would say as soon as you can, start exercising, but don't quit exercising in your 60s. Do whatever you can in your 60s, because whatever you can do in your 60s, you can do some subset of that in your 70s, 80s, and on. And I think they say motion is lotion. So the more that you keep in motion, the more you're going to be able to keep in motion.
We used to have a great client, and he died in his 90s, and he was a regular exerciser. And I remember him saying that in each decade, it just got a little more difficult, but he kept swimming all the way through until he hit 90. And then at 90, he's like, I'm done exercising.
Makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. I think I had mentioned that I started doing jujitsu last year at 63. And one of my friends was trying to convince me to quit it now because the risk that it could do some injury to me at this season is high. But at the same time, I think part of what I think about this decade is it was Travels with Charlie. What is that author's name? I can't think of it right now. He was a Pulitzer Prize winning one, but when he wrote that book, I think he was in his late 50s. He loaded up in an RV with his dog Charlie and went across the country, and everybody advised him not to do that because he was so old in his 50s. It's doctors and everybody. And so I think part of these decades things is what you choose to believe and accept. So if you choose to get old and not take risk in your 60s, you're probably not going to take risks in your 70s or 80s or more. So to do things that are outside of your comfort zone, I think you have to push yourself in your 60s, because it'd be really easy to not do anything that's risky at all.
I've been so inspired lately by this guy. Maybe you all have seen him on Facebook. His name's Robert, and he just did the Great Loop, which is a nautical adventure where you run up the Atlantic coast, cut across the Great Lakes, go down the Illinois through Chicago into the Mississippi, back to the Gulf of America, and then you cross your wake on the Atlantic. And he's 71, and he just did it. And I've been getting to know this guy through his videos, and he's traversed the Arctic. He's hiked the Grand Canyon. He's done all this stuff, and he did all of this post 52. That's when he started his adventures, is 52. And so, if your spouse says, "Yeah, I'm okay with it," then you should definitely go for it. It's inspiring. And there's another guy who's probably in his 20s, and he's doing that Great Loop on his kayak. Equally inspiring. A guy 71 crossed the Atlantic 3 times. And the last time he did it, he was 70.
I love it.
In a kayak.
That's nuts.
Crossing the Atlantic. I'm not
nuts.
saying you have to go that bold and crazy, but where is the adventuresome spirit? What's that look like for you?
And I think you can reignite that if you've neglected it. I think today you could do something today outside of your comfort zone, whichever one of these decades you're in. And to do that may just put a spark of curiosity in you that you haven't had in a day or two. John Steinbeck was that author I was thinking of. And that's a good read if you haven't read it. And probably bridging backwards to my 50s then, Doug, because that one's approaching you pretty rapidly.
Yeah,
right?
I'm ready.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah. And so one of the highlights of my 50s was my daughter asked me to hike the Inca Trail with her. I would have been mid 50s. And I was in a car wreck maybe 3 or 4 months before that was close to taking my life. And so there was some lasting effects from that. But at the same time, I'm like, you know what? A car wreck could take me out, or living could take me out. I'm going to go with living. And so we hiked the Inca Trail, and we reflected on that recently. And I didn't do research. Like if I have a medical ailment, I don't research it. I stay away from that. I just let the doctors tell me what to do with it. Right. And I didn't do research on the Inca Trail because I said yes, and I'm just going to get myself ready for it so I don't psych myself out. And we landed in Peru. And if you've ever had Andes chocolate, and they had on the cover that shows mountains like that, that's where we were, the Andes Mountains. And I looked at those mountains, and I bet my eyes got that big. And as Caitlin and I were reflecting on it, there were 3 specific times, and I'm not exaggerating, where I literally thought I was going to die.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what'd you do?
I just kept putting one foot in front of the other. I had like anxiety. The last one was at almost the end of the hike. I psyched myself out, and I caused myself to have an anxiety attack. And I just had to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And I told her, we had a coffee shop in the little town Cusco that we would go to every day to get acclimated to the altitude. And I told her, Caitlin, I realized most of the way through the journey that there was one thing I wanted to tell you that I forgot to tell you, and I didn't feel comfortable telling you while we were on the trail. And it's this: had I died doing that hike, I died exactly doing what I wanted to do, spending time with you, and don't have regrets that we did it, because I just want to live with my family and enjoy them. And so
maybe that's a 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. If you get invited to something, go do it. Even though it might be out of your comfort zone. It could be going to a Reds game. Whatever you get the invitation to, just go do it.
I think it'll open doors that you never imagined. Probably the doors that's going to open are the habits in your brain that you've had closed to think that you couldn't do that. Yeah, because I think had I known the specific risk of the Inca Trail, I probably would have talked to myself out of it by staying clueless to it and just realizing today's the day to live, that I got to enjoy that. I'd say the other thing in the 50s, and it kind of bridges backwards to the 40s. The 40s, I think I was in the worst physical condition of my life. And in the 50s, I vowed to take better care of myself, and I ran 10 miles on each of my birthdays in the 50s. And that was hard.
Drinking Mountain Dew in your 50s?
I think I did that in the 40s.
I was 40s. Okay. Yeah. I remember the refrigerator door shutting in our old office, and you didn't drink a Mountain Dew again.
That was our doctor friend next to us in our office. You remember his name?
The dentist?
Yeah. Yeah. He told me Mountain Dew is the worst thing you can put in your mouth. It eats your teeth up. And I'm like, no wonder my teeth are so sketchy. It's that stupid Mountain. Yeah, Mountain Dew. Don't do that. Don't do the do. Whatever. You guys do whatever you want. But yeah, there's a lot of bad things. I think I also heard somebody say don't drink your calories, and Mountain Dew has a lot of sugar and a lot of calories in that. So yeah.
I'm going to stay on the 50s for a second, just because I'm really looking forward to my 50s. And I'm looking at, and everything I learned, I've mostly learned it from you all. And so one of you all told me that your 50s is a great chance to be free in life. And that could be free, like financially, getting rid of some debts. That could be free of just relationships that have been dragging you down. Whatever it is, it could be extra pounds, whatever it is, just aiming for freedom. And they took this idea from this concept of the year of Jubilee, which I don't know a lot about, but I like that. I like the sound of Jubilee just because it's a joyful thing where you can express a lot of independence, knowing that you're taken care of, that you're provided for. you've been through some stuff, you've seen some stuff, you've probably created some stuff. And it's just I think going to be a great decade to live completely free.
And
that's the thing I'm looking forward to most.
I would, and I don't have the exposure because I've been self-employed, but it is it can be a frustrating decade for people that work for somebody, the 50s, because Fortune 500 companies don't want you anymore. Like that's a difficult part of the 50s. And I think of my friend that was fired in his 50s. He passed away a couple of years ago. And I think that demoralized him. And I think that happens more than you know, that somebody loses their role and you've kind of arced up, you've got your skill set, you're making a good amount of money. And when they pull that rug out from underneath you, it can steal your soul if you let it. And he was a motivator to me to watch how he navigated it. It was hard. He had to reposition his thoughts. He hadn't saved up to that point to the place he wanted to be, but his faith and opportunities opened the door. He had to work into his 70s to get there, but it taught me that you can rethink, even if difficulties happen at that season. Most of your difficulties are probably behind you at your 50s, like you've raised your kids, you've maybe buried your parents. It's hard to say, but there can be other difficulties in there, and you've got the toolkit that you've learned to get through it. And I would use any disappointments like that as maybe a liberating time to say, okay, what are we going to do with this? We're just going to have to rethink what we're doing.
I think when I look at my notes real quick, Keith, I've got, let's see, 50s and 40s. Here's the message. It's not too late, because I think the thoughts that come at us, whether that be from financial planners or life coaches or health experts, there's these doubts that can come in your head that, oh my goodness, it's too late for me. I should have. But it's not too late for you to start saving money. It's not too late for you to maybe it's like a significant portion of your income where you say, okay, I'm going to save 10% or I'm going to save 30%. It's not too late to start doing that right now. And so that's the type of stuff I get just really excited thinking about, that it's not too late, because there's a lot of life still ahead of you. Like if we can shift to our 40s, you think, okay, you have like 20, 30 years of really awesome productivity potential in front of you. And so if you haven't done everything the way Dave Ramsey would have suggested you do in your 20s and 30s, go for it. I mean, you've got some extremely great production years in front of you to work really hard and to dive into life.
My thought, we didn't really talk in advance of what we were thinking. We just said this is the outline we wanted to go today. But the 40s, I just wrote down the caption, stretch your expectations. In the 40s, what I sense from looking back to my 40s is that I had navigated my way through my incompetencies of my 20s and 30s. I had a certain level of confidence. I had a certain reputation I could lean into. I had physically not taken care of myself because of what the 30s were really demanding on me. And so the time management of it during that time in life was I didn't get that part of it right. However, I was able to hit the restart button on that. But the stretch your expectations. One of the thoughts I thought of was golden handcuffs. There's a number of local employers that they may have a rule of 80 or something, where if you work this many years with us and you're this age, if you add it up and it's 80, you get all these bells and whistles. And a number of years ago, I had somebody tell me they hated their last 18 years at that company. And I couldn't process that because it kind of violated one of my life principles. And that principle is to like what you do. And so I don't think I could do something for 18 years that I didn't like just so that I could retire from that place. Right. And then when I say stretch expectations, if you're not liking what you're doing at that point, it may be time to take a little retreat and think about your life from that point on. Because if you're not liking what you're doing, my friend got fired in his 50s and wasn't in a good enough place. It just meant he had to work till his 70s and it worked out that he enjoyed what he was doing.
I'm about to run through the tape of my 40s, and it's been the best decade ever.
Yeah.
And I'm expecting the next one to be even better. But like you're saying, I think now, if you're in your 40s or about to be in your 40s, you've got a lot going on, and there's no more adults in the room. You're it. And so what I would encourage you to do, one of my big wins of my 40s was stacking stuff. And what I mean by that is you probably got some kids, you got some coworkers, whatever, that bring people along with you. And so in my 40s, one of the things my family did is we raced bicycles.
Nice.
Like all of us.
Nice.
And so what did that do? That allowed us to build community. That allowed us to increase our fitness. That gave us a hobby and allowed us to have a lot of fun. We traveled. And so all of those things stacked together around a bicycle. And so if there's something that you can stack relationships, endurance, fitness, enjoyment, vacations, all in one area, I would encourage you to do it, because what it does, it's a time saving strategy, and it allows you to do things together instead of independently.
And I would encourage you that if you're forced to stack some things, maybe some things that you didn't decide to do because of you're in a sandwich generation where maybe you've got some older family members that are forcing things on you that you didn't expect. Those probably happen in your 40s and 50s, that you can have a good attitude about that, because those things could take away from you joining the bike club, right? Like they could, because they're going to take some amount of time. But to look at those as opportunities that you maybe hadn't had before. I've had a number of those opportunities that I didn't plan on, but I set my mind to make them a positive rather than a negative, so that what they stacked, a number of these, they were border relationships. So somebody moved in with us. So what they stacked for us, Doug, was they allowed us to teach our children about multi-generations, so we didn't have to lecture them. They were like watching, like wide-eyed going, huh, what's this? And so sometimes you don't pick the cards you're dealt, right? So like sometimes you have the flexibility, sometimes maybe you don't, but what you do have the flexibility is choose your attitude.
Well, in your 40s, okay, I'm probably just super excited about this because I'm coming out of it, but it's a great time to audit your life. And here are the areas that I would suggest you audit. I would suggest you audit your personal interests. It could be what you like to read, what you like to listen to, how you like to work out, whatever. Your spiritual interests, take an audit of that, where you are, your relationships, your finances, and then just your business, like maybe your creativity. And those pillars were brought to my attention. And I spent almost 10 years, the last 10 years, really auditing and leaning into each one of those 5 components.
I love that. I think the note I put on the 40s in that same vein was, don't be afraid to change roles. You're going to change roles in maybe all those areas. And don't be afraid of those new roles. So then you go back to the 30s.
Buy a minivan. That's my number one thing in your 30s. Go buy yourself a minivan. Even if you don't have kids, buy yourself a minivan, and don't buy a new one. Go buy what you can afford. Don't be envious of your neighbor having the new Honda Odyssey or whatever. You can go get a used Honda Odyssey, but buy a minivan. That's your number one recommendation in your 30s.
I tend to do, when I learn things at different times, I may write it and save it in a gimbal file, but there's one in there about a purple Taurus called Barney, and we learned a lot through cars during that period of time. And so the 30s, I just wrote slowly explore what's going on, because there's so much thing exploding into your life in your 30s that it gets stressful, because you're kind of starting to get responsibility, and that
it's time to be real in your 30s.
Yeah.
Like you can pretend a little bit in your 20s, but it's time to get real. No more BS, and be honest with yourself, and just say, hey, this is where we are.
Amanda reminded me of one. I told her yesterday, I don't remember it. And I asked her how she was doing, and she's like, okay. And she doesn't usually say that. She goes, I didn't get much sleep last night. I go, yeah, that's part of the 30s.
That's part of the 30s.
Yeah. And then when I was thinking of no sleep, I thought of many eyes too, that in my 30s, there were many eyes looking at me that I never anticipated that many eyes looking at me for insight, wisdom, and maybe even protection during the 30s.
You can build a really great life in your 30s. You don't have to chase luxury to do it. You can build a really great life based on the principles that are important to you. And you will be amazed at what you can do on not much sleep. And with sickness. I mean, there's constantly going to be sickness in your house in your 30s, and you'll be amazed at what you can do even when you're sick.
And literally, I don't think I have any cognitive issues, but I don't remember any of the emotional wear and tear of my 30s. I remember the ideas of staying up all night with the kids. I don't remember the like, how am I going to work tomorrow? Like that part of it went away, and all I have is joy when I think back to those times in my 30s. I don't feel the pain anymore.
Yeah.
The 20s, I wrote down, I saw this somewhere recently, the 20s are when you can wave a magic wand in your own mind and decide what you want to be when you grow up. Your 20s, you can define what, where, how, when, why. You should, if you haven't in your 20s stopped and thought out, like, why am I here? What am I going to do to change the world? The 20s is the time to kick that off, in my opinion. Like you can do anything in your 20s. You may look like a pauper. You may be a pauper, but the 20s, my goodness.
Yeah. If you're like someone who likes older people in your 20s, it's not that hard to find an older person. But if you like older people, this would be my advice to you. Learn from my mistakes. Don't compare yourself to them. I mean, you're going to have some years to get to where you want to be. And so if you're not there yet where you want to be, it's okay. And I just encourage give yourself some grace, but also now's the time to put on your big boy pants, start saving some money, put some money away, get a game plan. And if you're looking for a spouse, make sure you're communicating about what your hopes and dreams are. Make sure you're communicating about where you are, even with your finances. And this types of stuff will lay a great foundation for your 30s and 40s.
I haven't been in a while. I watched one in the last 12 months for a little bit, but the county and state fairs have tractor pulls. And the way I think a tractor pull, they don't change the amount of weight on the trailer. It just changes its position that puts more pressure and slows things down. And what I thought about your 20s is that you can add friction to life, like the way that the tractor pull works. And my thought about the 20s is to avoid adding any unnecessary friction during your 20s. And that friction, because it can limit your 30s, 40s, 50s, the things you might do to add friction in your life could affect your decisions and flexibility later. And I said, one of the things that can be friction is your location. Like I chose to leave Indiana and go to Houston in my 20s, and it opened all kinds of possibilities for me. I probably couldn't do that today, right? Like and so your location is a form of friction. If you decide to set up shop in Carmel, Indiana, it's going to cost you a lot more than it is. What's your favorite town? Leesburg?
I love Leesburg.
Yeah. The cost is going to be, so the cost of that location is going to have friction. Houston was in a depression when I moved there. So I was a rich 23, 24-year-old because everything was on sale in Houston. And the example I would say is that I have a picture when we went to, I just forgot the name of that town in West Texas.
Midland?
Midland, the guys that were living in tents, they literally put air conditioners on it.
And that was going to be my thoughts for your 20s is, okay, you've probably lived a life where you've gone through school, you've maybe gone through college, your parents have helped you out. But now is the time to realize that, hey, look, there's, you have to lay a new foundation. And the wording I had was, no one owes you anything. And so if you start working somewhere, no one owes you anything. You may have been a straight A student. You may have been a C student. one owes you, like you don't get the right to advance just because of you showing up. Like I want to encourage you to lean into your work, really love what you do, and just take a bunch of risks in your 20s, like from your business or whatever. If you're a school teacher, whatever you're doing, just lean into it and work really hard.
And yeah, I think even with that is how I'd probably put that in my thoughts is like another friction point is foolish beliefs. Like if you go into your 20s and exercise on your foolish beliefs, if you believe somebody's going to owe you something, you're going to find out really quickly that they're not going to care.
Yeah, because the person working with you is thinking about buying a minivan.
Right.
So they've got to provide for their family.
Yeah.
Or they've got their parents living in their house and they're funding. And so these are your coworkers. They've got real life stuff going on.
Well, the 20s are a cool time. Like I
think they're the hardest time.
Because you don't know who you are yet.
I think they're so hard because you're shifting from that academic life to real life.
Right.
You're looking for relationships. You've been around the opposite sex for the last, 12 years of school or whatever. And now you're working a cubicle, I mean, it's a big shift. It's tough.
Yeah. And really in your 20s, if you're fortunate, you discover that schooling didn't teach you what you need to know, that you actually have to start learning now in your 20s. Like you need to know what you need to know. How do I buy a house? What are property taxes? What is car insurance? All these things that really matter. You have to start really learning in your 20s.
So for all you guys who had C's and went to the school that you had a chip on his shoulder or whatever, be encouraged because your 20s is a great time to learn. Your 30s is that was the consistent theme in all my notes is this is a great era to learn.
Yeah, I think it's the great reset too, because I think once you get into the working world, you find out nobody really cares what you got in your algebra class. They only care what do you bring to the table today. And so you can reset and start all anew in your 20s if you choose to. And again, it's putting aside foolish beliefs and thinking forward with it. Well, Doug, that's a great conversation about the time of decades and how each of them have special opportunities and special, maybe unique needs inside of those. I appreciate you bringing to the table. Anything else you got on mind?
Well, you say this a lot, but I think for wherever you find yourself today, just know that your best days are ahead. You might have kicked butt in your 30s and you lost your job in your 50s. That sucks. That part sucks. But the best days of your life are still in front of you because of the opportunities that you get to say yes to some really, really wonderful things.
And probably I left you a voicemail yesterday that said that a phone call we had might have been one of the top 5 of my whole career. So there you have it. It was a great day yesterday and it'll be a great one today. And hope your weekend is a spectacular one. And we'll see you guys really soon.